Okay, we are back in our regional district board meeting. Could I ask that someone please move the consent agenda? Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Stoner. All in favor, any opposed, motion carries. Is there any business arising from the minute? We're down into committee reports, and we're now at 6.1. Area B, Agricultural Advisory Committee recommendations.
I'd be happy to make that motion.
Okay.
Ready for that, Chair?
Sure.
Move that the Area B AAC recommends to the SLRD board that we extend an invitation to the District of Lillooet to appoint a District of Lillooet Council liaison to the Area B AAC as a non-voting member of the committee. And I wish that we'd done this years ago. It just was an idea at the last meeting.
A second.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions? Do you have someone in mind?
We don't have, we would just invite mayor and council to consider it.
Okay.
And I'm sure that Claire would probably write the letter to them, I'm guessing. That, and I really do kind of feel embarrassed that we haven't done it sooner, because I don't know how many times we've said, how can we get the district in, you know, like, just we want to convince them of the value of this committee, so it would be really nice to have them sitting. And it's not an onerous amount of time, it's like 3 meetings of 2 hours a year with, and one in person in Lillooet, so it's a small amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the motion has been seconded. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Great. We're at 6.2. These are recommendations from the Policy and Development Review Committee. Okay, so this is the respectful workplace policy moved by Director Stoner. Seconded by Director Birch-Jones. Does anyone have any questions? We have Monica here to answer questions if anyone's got them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
6.2 of this policy, not on the agenda of the policy.
Yeah.
There's a phrase highlighted in red. I don't remember discussing that. I just wondered how that got in there. Maybe I missed a meeting or something.
Go ahead. Oh, Monica, go ahead.
So that was one of the comments made at the policy committee meeting, was that the board, sort of as the collective supervisor of the CAO, be inserted in there as they are also responsible for those items as supervisor of the CAO. And so that was the one recommendation that came from the policy committee. And so that's been updated in the policy. And
That's the part of the meeting I missed. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Director Hopful and then Director Birch-Jones with questions.
Thanks, through the chair. So I was just wondering, under 5.3 discrimination, it says includes conduct based on or motivated wholly or in part by any of the grounds covered under the Human Rights Code, which is offensive or could reasonably be expected to be offensive. And one of those is criminal conviction. So I just wanted a little bit of clarity on that, because a criminal conviction can be like a minor misdemeanor or like a serious felony. So I wasn't comfortable with having that in there. So I just like a little clarification on that, please.
This is page 82 of our package.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
so these are grounds that are covered under the Human Rights Code. We can't discriminate based on someone having a criminal conviction. For example, for employment purposes. So, you know, if we were to do a criminal record check and an individual was found to have a criminal record, we would not be able to deny their employment due to their criminal. Now, I mean, there's different situations,
Yeah.
but typically, if they were found to have a prior or criminal conviction on file, we would not be able to deny them employment, for example.
Okay, that seems really odd to me because I know that, I mean, why would you do a criminal records check? And why would that be required if it had no bearing on whether we could hire somebody or not? And so I'm understanding that we can't even take that out. Is that correct?
That is correct, but I mean, there's certain situations where it wouldn't apply. For example, if the position had a certain level of
Security.
financial authority, and if the conviction was, you know, directly related to something related to that, then we could deny employment based on that. But if it was, you know, like a motor, you know, unpaid parking tickets or something like
Right.
that, and it was totally unrelated to the position that they were applying for, then that would be an example of discrimination.
Okay. Heather,
Just for some clarity, because this is in the Human Rights Code, there is some clarity language that says in no way connected with the employment or if the person has obtained a pardon or offense. So as it's been said, it's in no way connected with the employment. You can make a decision if it's connected with the employment. So if they did 25 years in jail for fraud, you might not want to hire them as your CFO.
and that's no longer discrimination. That falls under a different decision-making criteria that's allowed within the limits.
Which we can, I mean, it might be good going back to the Human Rights Code if you want further clarification, that's our understanding.
There's a higher court that decides that. So it's not. up to
Okay,
us.
thank you.
Thank you. Tony, go ahead.
Just a quick question for you. This terminology, is that lifted directly from the Human Rights Code?
Yes.
I was surprised. I didn't think they used the term sex anymore. I thought it was gender. But
I think it's referred to in different ways and in different.
So, gender identity or expression, it's got sex, sexual orientation.
That can be modified if there's more modern wording.
I think we just lift this straight
Yeah.
from the language and
Right.
leave it at that. Unless there's real, like, position to. Okay, any other questions? Let's all hand over here. Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thanks. Just, and I actually don't remember adding this at the policy committee, that 6.2, the one that's highlighted now in red. Because I read that and I thought, well, the corollary of that is also true in that we would like the CAO in their relationships with board members, that there not be bullying, harassment, discrimination, or violence. And I don't know if do we have that covered?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just that when I see the SLRD board is considered as a supervisor of the CAO, and that is certainly true, and I'm fine. But the corollary of that is also true in that the CAO, certainly if you're a lowly area director, there's a different kind of a power dynamic and so on. And so that's a relationship. I'm not sure that we've covered it in this policy.
So
Right.
responsibilities of,
CAO towards the board members, just the same way. I mean, that should go both ways, right?
so
Is it covered in there?
technically the CAO is an employee and they would be, that would be they've been covered under 6.1, employees and volunteers are responsible.
And that would cover,
And also the CAO as a manager would also, 6.2 would also apply.
be responsible for modeling that behavior. Okay. Okay.
Jenna?
I'm happy to speak to this because I think I was the one who raised it at the committee level for the addition of 6.2. And my rationale behind it was just to explicitly recognize that the board is an employer. So the language there and making sure that this policy does actually apply to us in that same way. And to, as, Ms. Lindsay just said, or as much, sorry, as Monica just said, that, the, reciprocity of that seems to be.
Perfect.
So it's about holding ourselves accountable to our one employee.
Thanks, Director Demerita.
I'll ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Is the board under WorkSafe PC? Are we covered with
No.
WorkSafe PC?
No.
We're not employees.
So, just to the question that Vivian asked, about staff hitting and harassing the directors, where do we go?
To the chair. And if it's not the chair, then it would be the vice chair. And if it's not the vice chair, then it would be as assigned. Because you wouldn't. I think that's all contemplated in here as.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I felt that from the conversation that there would always be a next level to go to. So if it wasn't the chair or if it wasn't the vice chair, then it would be the director of HR to
Is
at
it-
least
is
start
it
the
explicit
conversation.
in this thing?
Yes.
Where's it? Show me where it is.
I believe it's on page 7. Whatever one is, city. Apologies, page 8 of the policy.
Page 85 of the full report, or the full.
Right, the formal resolution.
And so, under this policy, if the respondent is an employee, the investigator is the HR manager, subject to, if the HR manager is the target or the respondent, the investigator is the CAO. If the CAO is the target or the respondent, the board chair is the investigator. And so, depending on which staff it is, either just general staff or the CAO, for example, it would either be the board chair or the CAO, who's the person you report to.
I see that page.
Got it.
Thank you.
Question?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I'm okay with this one, to express and so forth. But the one question I have, and it's based on experience I had in a larger organization some time ago. Who decides what is harassment? And what happened in this other organization was it basically got to the point where if I said I've been harassed, then I have been harassed. That's it. If I feel harassed, then I am harassed. And it caused all kinds of problems. It really did. And so I just raise it here, it's just something to be cautious about. Just my feeling was, and just because somebody says I am harassed, it's not necessarily so. So who makes that decision?
Well, I think that's through the chair in the policy. This policy is a little bit more detailed. We're trying to lay out some more guidelines on what constitutes disrespectful conduct. Now, everyone's interpretation is different, perception, interpretation, and so there are different avenues to address someone's complaint. And there is in the policy, there's a new informal process as well. So, you know, if someone's feeling like they've been harassed or bullied, there is the ability to, and suggestion that they can resolve it informally. And if not, if they don't feel comfortable, then there are other steps laid out in the policy. And through that investigation process, through that, having someone as an investigator, investigating and assisting with the process, that process will determine findings if, you know, any harassment or bullying actually took place.
I'd like to have some confidence that sometimes things could be dealt with at a really early stage before it, you know, it creates too many problems.
That language is expressly in there where it says this complaint should be made as soon as practical. So that it can be dealt with right away in the informal process and discussed right away. In the event that it can't be reported right away, as soon as practical is sort of the language there. Because when things are fresh in your mind, that's important. But it's all relative to people's level of confidence in their position within themselves. And we can't possibly write out a timeline that is gonna satisfy everyone's level of comfort. But I think there are tons of provisions in here that explains what is conduct that is constituting bullying and harassment by the sort of technical definitions. And then there are nuances that are also described here. And Chris, you had a question.
Well, just make fun, like, we aren't covered by WorkSafe BC, so this is kind of our, what we can do for ourselves as a board. And I think, any process or policy, if someone's really determined, they could find a way to hack it and abuse it, but I think there are lots of checks and balances in here. It's a great start, and I think it makes our sort of expectations of one another very explicit, which is that.
Just some comments on the policy itself. I think this is a very strong policy. It's an important policy to have in place. Starting at the top of the organization and all the way through, so that folks know that we are setting a standard for respectful workplace. It is presenting various options in terms of providing opportunities for informal resolution, everything to formal resolution. And I think, having these sorts of guidelines and policies clear, that everybody knows what their options are is important. Hopefully we never have to use them. It's always better to have them in place.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Thank you very much for this. This is great. As has been said, would someone like to move that we approve this with a change to 6.2 as indicated, and that the board, so we'll do separately, so that this new board policy is approved with a change to 6.2. Someone like to make that motion? Director Richmond, seconded by Director Rainbow. Comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And the second that is that board policy number 5.3, which is the previous policy, be repealed. Moved by Director Herford, seconded by Director Pettengill. Comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we are at 6.2.2, and this is a review of the draft code of conduct bylaw. And I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, Gail Harris, Legislative Coordinator with SLRD. Staff here to present the proposed Code of Conduct bylaw for 3 readings and adoption. We're here for any questions.
Anyone have any questions? All right, would someone like to make the motion that we read it a first, second, and third time? Moved by Director Rainbow, second by Director Demare. Any comments? Go ahead.
Thank you for all the work on this, from the staff and to the committee members for some thorough review and some feedback. We went through a few iterations, and I think we're in a really strong space. Staff did a really great job of pulling, I think, as much as possible from existing codes of conduct in neighboring municipalities. So I think that it does reflect what we've seen through the region. And similar to the previous one, I do think it's important to have these well thought out early and often. And hopefully we don't have to use them. And we also have seen that they are not unto themselves an ideal tool. And maybe the province one day will come along and provide some more fulsome support to local governments who might really need it. We've seen some suggestions of that in the media as of late, but I think until the province does that, it's really important to have sort of
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, with that, I will call the question on first, second, and third reading. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And now that we move to adopt, moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Demare. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And that the board code of conduct policy 1.16 be rescinded, moved by Director Stoner, seconded by Director Demare. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. That staff bring.
That's two together.
Yes. The next two, that staff bring back the associated amendment to the remuneration bylaw. And that if the above noted review is extended beyond 2025, that staff bring back the associated amendment. To provide the ability to withhold remuneration if a board member contravenes the new code of conduct bylaw. Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Morton. Comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Good job, Dale.
Great job, Gail. Thank you. Okay, 6.3.1. This is a Canada Community Building Fund, Community Works Fund project funding request, and we have Acting Director of Finance, Colin Hodgins, to answer questions. Or did you want to hit the tops of the wave?
I don't really have anything to add,
Okay,
just CWF for civic addressing project in Area B. I know Vivian is very excited to get underway.
Super excited about this.
okay.
And I'm happy to move it if there's no questions.
Are there questions? No, do you have a question?
Yeah, just in theory, are people obligated to have their address or their number on a sign, but it often doesn't happen, so we're filling in the blanks? Or is this, it's actually optional and we're just filling in a global sort of absence of numbers?
I think our emergency coordinators have identified that there's real challenges without addressing, and so this has been a very many years long project of trying to understand where everyone's address is. And so this is one of the ways that we can support the community in being available. Does that cover it? Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, just, I think this is great, and I've been many places where I can't find the address, and it's frustrating even when you're just trying to go for dinner or something, so I can imagine emergency response like being critical. We're installing these as well. This isn't like a provide for the community and they install, and we're leading that project, and that's part of this as well. Cool. That's great.
We did a pilot on the High Line,
Yeah.
after the Casper Creek fire. And I do believe that when somebody actually finishes and their building permit, that the part of that is that they are required to post their address, their civic address, and there's some specifications around that, but it's a little bit of anarchy up there in Area B, and frankly, no, it is very difficult to track down, and the High Line was probably a perfect example. And more seriously, and I'm not gonna be popular for this as the Area B director. I hope that it's appreciated by many people, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that won't appreciate it, and I don't care. I think that it is so important for the emergency responders that if we can save those guys some time in the event, that it's really well worth it. And so I've, staff know I'm the letter, I'm happy we're sending the letter out to our citizens, and I would like to contribute to that letter or have a look at it before it goes, and I'm sure willing to take feedback at that point from the constituents, but no, we're gonna proceed ahead and put these signs up as soon as it's reasonable within the staff's timeline, and I think it's a very good measure.
Mine's a comment,
Go ahead.
wait till it.
No, that's fine.
Okay. During our fire in Goldbridge, that Goldbridge group that stayed, they actually made pie plates with the numbers on them and nailed them to wherever they could.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at in the rural areas.
Some of the outline here.
So once what staff have done with this one is excellent. If you dug right into it, the process that they're going to go through, it's just excellent. And I'm looking to see how this process goes, and hopefully good for area also.
Okay. So with that, it was moved and seconded. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Colin?
Thanks.
Okay, we're now at 7.1, and this is a request for decision regarding the electoral area B OCP update. We have Alex. I'm writing a very black name right now.
That's okay. So good morning, Alex McKay, planner with the SLRD.
Thank you.
So I'll just give a very brief introduction. This report was before the board in May, but it was deferred to this meeting today. This is an update to the existing Area B OCP, a very high level update where we've done a graphic reorganization of the document to make it easier to use. And we've made some minor content updates, things like integrating current census data, integrating information from the new housing need and demand study, updating ministry names, that type of thing, with the intent being that there will be a comprehensive review of the document in 2027, 2028, and that will include community engagement. And at that time, we may make more significant changes. So all of the objectives and policies in the OCP, by and large, have not been amended, except where there were inconsistencies with other SLRD bylaws and policies, and provincial changes as well. So things like changes to the RGS have been integrated. So I think I will leave it there. The recommendations for you today are the ones that were there in May, but it is staff's understanding that the area director would like to see some changes made prior to first reading. So the recommendation would be to refer back to staff for revisions, and then we can bring it back for consideration of first reading and referrals in July. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, I made a mistake last month by saying to defer where, what I really meant and should have said and what I'd like to say now. It's just what Alex said, is to refer back to staff for, and there's just a few edits. There's some population numbers, some First Nations references and some photographs that I think should be corrected, updated, and I've already sent them. And it's some small changes, if not a lot of them, but I think important before it gets sent out for first reading. So the motion is to refer back to staff for those edits.
Question?
I just, from May, I had a couple comments that I wanted to add, and I'm not sure if now might be the time to do that before it goes back to staff.
Sure.
So yeah, in general, I saw some references to Crown land, and I thought the language now is land claimed by the Crown or something equivalent.
That's a good point.
In the, I had on page 392, the addition, oh, and this is of the May agenda, I guess. But the BC Hydro, the section there, I didn't see a lot of environmental impacts mentioned in that section. Now, maybe this isn't the time at which we dig into that, but so it's just something that I noted. And then there's a section on TUPs speaking to may allow use not
Can I
permitted.
ask you to pause? I'm sorry. I'm seeing Zoom challenges, and because this is live streamed, we want to make sure that we're online. So if you could just hold that thought for a second. Take a break.
Make a Vivian's face on the screen.
Take two. And Chris was mid-streaming questions. I think we've got our live stream and screens and everything working again. Lori, can you hear us? Good. Okay, awesome. So we'll call this meeting back to order and go ahead.
Yeah, so the last item, and I assume I'm not meeting just starting right now.
No, yeah.
Okay, so the last item is on page 72, the draft OCP or 216 of our agenda package. It's not an area that was actually edited, so maybe this is outside the scope, but just what's written here is my understanding of TUPs, but we've had some discussion which makes me wonder if this is clear or accurate. So my understanding is that TUP can vary a use defined by a zoning bylaw, but if you want to do something contrary to the OCP itself, that requires an OCP amendment still. And as long as that's the understanding, I'm okay here. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's my understanding as well. I'll just defer to.
Yes,
You're correct as well. Okay.
So that was the extent of that comments then.
Okay. Director Stoner, I think you were here for the list.
No, I was just wondering if there was an opportunity to provide first reading with direction to staff for amendments.
to keep this process moving, but my understanding is that the amendments are probably too many at this point. So we would just refer this back to staff with feedback would probably be a perfect. I'm correct in that. That might be the way I frame that question.
So thank you through the chair. Staff's understanding is that Director Birch-Jones would prefer to see the edits made prior to referrals. So if we do it first reading, we typically would then move into referrals right away. So doing it this way gives us a chance to make those revisions before first reading, before it's sent out more broadly.
Okay. Any other questions? You did? Yeah, okay, sorry, that's okay. Director Herford, did you have questions? No, okay, does anyone else have questions? No? Okay, so, then I think what we're doing is we're referring this back to staff to come back with the revisions prior to first reading. Is that clear enough as a motion? Okay, moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Morgan. Comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for being here. Okay, 7.2, a zoning amendment bylaw and OCP amendment bylaw. Electoral area D agricultural updates for first reading. And we have Director Needham here.
Joe, would you like a presentation?
Just briefly.
Okay, Kim Needham, Director of Planning and Development Services. Zoning Amendment Bylaw 1915 and OCP Amendment Bylaw 1916 are presented for first reading and referrals. The bylaws are being, they're necessary because there have been some changes to the Agricultural Land Act and to the Agricultural Land Reserve boundaries that necessitate some amendments. And the amendments are really around the secondary farm residence requirements and the ALR boundary, and just putting in some conditions around where a secondary residence will be allowed as of right. Right now, it's not allowed as of right. If there are any questions, I would be happy to try and answer them.
Go ahead.
Thank you to the chair. I think that's all makes good sense and is rather clear. The one piece that I was uncertain about were the mapping boundary changes. And where those were, where those changes were being made. And I don't know if I just missed that in the report or the map that's presented in page 312 of our package contains that, and I just wasn't able to pull it out. There's lots of different colors.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the map in front of me, but it's to do with changes in the river. So the Squamish River is always moving around. So there are what we call accretions. So where the land has been accreted, they've changed the boundaries to add more and less land to the boundary.
Question, go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate the cleanup around employee housing, but as I understand what's in the ALC just allows secondary housing without an employee qualification. Does that mean we are obligated to do so, or could we sort of layer on some employee requirements around that? And I'm just sort of thinking about the rest of our policy and policy discussions. It's not clear to me that just simply allowing 2 houses of any sort on ALC lands just because the ALC does, or AL is something we'd want to do.
Yeah, and that's been what we've opted to do thus far, is to not change this. From my understanding, we're now being told that we have to provide for the secondary residence. And we're putting in some requirements around it, so that the property must be 4 hectares or greater. That it has to be under 500 square meters for the existing farm residents. And there has to be farm class. And the farm residents can be a maximum of 90 square meters. And on parcels of over 40 hectares, which there aren't that many, they can be 186 meters squared.
So if we can have some qualifications on the second residence, can we have one that specifies it's for employees or sort of farm worker?
I think that is inherent in the definitions, and my apologies, this is a report that was prepared by Claire Dewar, and she couldn't be here today, so. I think that the whole point of the secondary farm residence is for farm workers. And I'd have to look at that definition to be able to answer your question, and I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
It does say additional dwelling units in the form of temporary farm worker housing may be permitted.
But my understanding was that's over and above the two sort of by right, and I'm sort of concerned about that secondary by right. From, again, all our other policy work, it seems to me like that should be restricted to employee housing or worker housing, if we can.
I think we'll just have to come back with that. Okay.
Yeah, we can do that and sort that out before then.
My speakers list has Director Bridget next and then Director Ring.
Okay, thank you. Who did the Squamish Valley Agricultural Plan? Is it the same group that we just added Director Rainbow to? The Climate Action Network, what are they? Yes?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna let him finish her thought.
Sorry, I'm just taking some notes here.
Totally. Okay, the question was, who did the Squamish Valley area plan?
Agricultural Plan and Land Use Inventory. And
So the land use inventory is done by the ministry. Approximately every 5 years they come through and they go to every single property. Area D ag plan, I think that's still being worked on.
right, so I was sort of looking for the equivalent of the AAC in areas B and C, sorry for all these letters. But you know, we have those valuable committees in B and in C, not in D, but in D, there's the group that Director Rainbow was added to. I think it's the Climate Action Network. Okay. So, yeah, I was wondering if they had any input into, or would they have some input into this? Would that be one of the referrals?
They can be, Squamish Food Policy Council is in the list.
Okay, excellent. So then the only other thing I couldn't quite understand was on the map, there are some areas that are called special planning and study areas, and I wondered what that was. But maybe that's a question for Claire.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I don't have that map in front of me.
Okay.
I think those are designations from the OCP that you're probably looking at.
Director Rainbow.
Okay, thank you. In some ways, when I read this, it makes a whole lot of sense, and I'm certainly in favor of preserving farmland and encouraging land that's not being used to be brought into production. But I've talked to some people up in the valley, and there are some issues, and it revolves around the size of the units. There are a number of lots up there that are smaller than the 4 hectares, 10 acres. And some of those people are attempting or they are beginning to intensively farm those properties. But we want to encourage them. And some of them have concerns about not being able to have, because the property is too small, the secondary dwelling on that property. And sometimes when we're talking about farm workers, when you look into who are the farm workers, it's quite likely family members. It's either, you know, a brother and his wife or parents or something like that. So I would hope that any definition we had would include relatives, that they don't necessarily need to be paid employees. The other thing that, you know, question I have is, what I would like is for us to meet with the committee of people and with Crystal Tembury and go through this with them, particularly looking at the size of some of those units, and is it possible for us to put together a proposal that would deviate from this, reduce the amount from 4 hectares to 3 or whatever is appropriate. When's the best time to do that? Is it best to do first reading and then deal with it between first and second? Or is it something that we should do before we even consider first reading?
Through the chair, we can, through the referral process, we can reach out to Crystal Tenbrink and chat with her. Keeping in mind, like all of the policies in Area D, and any ALC policies, to see if there's an ability to go smaller. There are like hazard risks in the valley, as you know, and so with the flooding down there, which can be pretty severe, can also be challenging for people to have wells, and usually the minimum size for a well is 1 hectare. In any case, that'd be something we'd have to look at.
And I think we need to be honest and recognize that there are some situations that exist there right now which don't comply with the bylaws. So what, you know, what do we want to do about that? And to really implement or enforce our bylaws, we'd be having to tell some people they've got to vacate, leave their homes. We have to be prepared to break some families and so on. So I think before we get too entrenched in this, we should meet with people that are affected and give them an opportunity to talk to us about what it is they want and what they think the solutions could be. So as I said, I don't mind whether it comes before first reading or whether it comes between first and second. And I think it definitely needs to happen.
What you're suggesting is a different type of engagement than would be legislated in this case?
Well, what would happen in area B or area C is the Agricultural Advisory Committee would
Be referred and
be referred to, and they would come back with some recommendations.
Yeah.
We've said, no, we can't have an AAC in area D because we're connected with Squamish, we've got this joint thing.
Yeah.
But it should be treated the same way as we treat an AAC. And I think we should meet with that group, and yeah, they should have more voice than just general population.
okay.
Well, I would typically very much agree with you, Director Rainbow. I think one of the challenges here is that we're bringing our regulations in line with what is established by the ALC. So those requirements of the 4 hectare parcel, that is not our staff bringing forward that suggestion, that is just implementing the requirements laid out by the province. And so I don't know how well it serves us to do public engagement of that nature when we don't actually have decision-making authority. I'm happy to do some engagement from an informational standpoint of like, we are bringing our legislative, like our bylaws up to speed with the provincial legislation, but I don't want to send you and our staff in to engage with the community on something that we actually can't change.
You
Yeah.
don't wanna ask
No,
questions
no.
that you're not prepared to make a difference to, because these aren't.
I'm getting the questions right now. So the simple answer is just say, sorry, can't do anything, go to the province.
Or refer to the ALC, like refer them to speak to the ALC. Or the websites that will have lots of the information.
Okay, then I think, I understand what you're saying, so I'll sort of pull this out of this process.
Okay.
And talk to Crystal, and I've had a request from people in the valley to have a meeting and talk about it. So we'll do that and either bring something to here or I'll send it directly to the ALC. I don't say that antagonistically, I'm just saying.
That's fine.
I just need to
Yep.
help them out and work with them. So,
For sure, and we can take that offline and figure out.
okay.
I had Mike and then Carmen. You're good? Yeah, Carmen.
I know we just put that away, but I wanted to thank Director Raymond for raising the issue. And I wanted to, do we not have the ability to go further if we wanted? This is the setting the baseline and aligning our regulations with the baseline. So I do think that there's a conversation about what more looks like, but it is very framed by, this is what we can do. Now, whether that's something that we want to do as a board, I don't know that we haven't had that conversation about going further. But I just wanted to challenge that we can't move it. So, well, we can, it just, the baseline is moving. But we could be more restrictive, but we can't be more permissive than what the provincial provision is. So I just wanted to frame that as. So I don't know if that changes your thoughts on this, Director Rainbow, or anyone else, but we do have the ability to go further, but maybe that's not the concern. Maybe that's the counter to what the concerns have been.
All the people up there have done a fair bit of research into what happens in other parts of the province. And it's sort of a general comment is that the ALC, that they make rules that, and what are they looking at? They're looking at the factory farms in Richmond and the Fraser Valley, and they make rules that work for them, but don't work for a 3-hectare property, which is ALR land. And so I think there is room for some discussion about what kinds of things could we do with smaller units that encourage agricultural production, but still have some controls about what happens and what doesn't happen. So
just one more reply and then I think maybe that exploring what those things look like and how we can support that from an advocacy perspective, we can contemplate that as a group if there's things that should change in the regs, but basically falling back to where we were originally.
Okay.
So just my understanding, because a comment was made about we'll just want to make sure that, you know, if people, as long as what they're doing today is compliant with today's rules, we can do things that are more strict and it's not retroactively enforced. So they're grandfathered and it's fine. So we don't have to worry of like, we're gonna all of a sudden make someone illegitimate unless they're already illegitimate. So I don't think that's concern. From the responses to my question, it sounds like there's some uncertainty about where the ALC is dictating to us and where we have some flexibility. I would like to understand a bit better where that line is because of, you know, again, consistent with some of our policy, I'm hesitant to actually make it really easy to have multiple dwellings. I think that personally have a bias towards, again, tying it to employment. I would really like to hear what the Food Policy Council has to say on this. So if there's an opportunity to get that clarity about what we can or can't do and what their feedback is, I would appreciate that at the appropriate time.
Anyone else? Lori, did you have any questions?
Not really. I'm just wondering, you know, I'm thinking about Lillooet and some of our properties. So I know they're not like 4 hectares and or 10 acres. Like it just seems like quite a bit to me, but I'll dig into that further.
All right. All right, then I guess, would anyone like to make the motion to give it first reading
Yeah.
Make the referrals, we can do those all together, right?
I'll move that.
Okay. Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Stoner. Any comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Is staff wanting a resolution, just because there was a little bit of feedback that was provided by the directors around the table, because we could provide another resolution just to say that staff incorporate the feedback provided by the board into the proposed bylaw prior to the board considering second reading.
I'd like to make that motion. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Rainbow. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
I'll make a comment. This one,
Yeah, the order of go is if you do that before the question is called. Post motion comments are complicated, but go ahead.
just listening to all this. Has there ever been a session with staff and directors for the areas with all three of these groups? Area B, Area C, and the Squamish group, or Squamish Valley group, together to look at something like that. And actually, you know, when it gets referred, does it get referred to each individual one, but as a group? Because policies for all area,
Yeah.
just throwing that out.
I would. Hesitation of responding on behalf of staff, but my experience working with the Squamish Valley Agricultural Plan and the Food Policy Council, and especially having Director Rainbow now appointed to that, it is working not specifically as the other agricultural committees that we have in Area C and Area B, but it is very similar in that it serves as kind of the joint working group and the referral period for body. So that working relationship I would suggest is there both amongst staff as well as the around you.
Let's move on to the security issuing bylaw. There are two, so there's,
Was that 1916 and 1915 all at once? that
Yeah.
were being passed?
do you want me to
Okay.
do them separately?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Logan.
Tell us about the security issuing bylaws. In Squamish.
Pretty straightforward. We have two security bylaws. First, for Village of Pemberton for 1.69 million. The second being for the District of Squamish for 10 million total. These are both for the fall issuance from MFA.
Deadline is August 8th.
Yes.
We can't defer it. Does anyone have any questions? Everyone comfortable? We'll do them separately. We will give first, second, and third reading if someone will make this motion to consider bylaw number 918-2025 for the Village of Pemberton. Back. Thank you. Seconded by Director Rainbow. Comments? Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And that we adopt this bylaw 1918-2025. And move forward, moved by Director Rainbow, second by Director Demare. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And now bylaw 1919-2025. This is the District of Squamish request. You want to move that for first, second, and third reading? Director Rainbow. Seconded by Director Stoner. Comments? For fire hall, the fire hall will come in handy. Indeed. Indeed. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And that this bylaw be adopted. By Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Morton. All in favor, anyone opposed, motion carries. All right, we're moving along. Look how quickly we're moving on. 8.1, the BAO verbal update.
Hi, everyone, Heather Paul, CAO at SLRD. As we do every time, we'd like to notify the board and public that we're going to be working outside of office hours. We will be closing on July 22nd, 2025, between 2:30 and 4:30 p.m. for the annual staff gathering. Celebrate summer and celebrate our teamwork and all the accomplishments that we have done in the year and continue to persevere on. The office is normally closed between 1 and 2 every day. It will not be. It will just be open all the way. And then close at 2:30.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, motion to receive is at the end of your verbal. Motion to receive, Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Stoner. Comments, all in favor, any opposed, motion carries. All right, here we are, the most fun that local governments have. Is the 2024 statements of financial information. Review.
This report is the 2024 Statement of Financial Information. What this report highlights is director remuneration, staff remuneration for those who received more than 75,000 in annual payments, and then supplier payments, grants, and contributions over the amount of 25,000. Maybe I'll just open up for any questions on the report.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I have to scrutinize my own remuneration because this is the first time that I noticed that mine was higher than the rest of the municipal directors in this table, and I was just curious as to why that was.
I can answer that. The reason is there's an additional amount paid for those who are on the Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District Board, and an additional amount if you're the chair of the Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District Board. So those would be the two additional
That was
amounts.
news to me. Great to figure that out through the Sophie report. Amazing transparency. The Sophie response. Thank you.
Chris, go ahead.
I just, I'm wondering if our chair knows, because of context, if there's any current lobbying around the $75,000 cutoff. Because when you look at the cost of living right now, that feels like an invasion of privacy, that cutoff for people. Like, I understand start getting big bucks, maybe it's a bit more sensitive. I know this has been a historical conversation, but like $75,000 is just, that's
Yeah.
like an issue, privacy wise.
Yeah, so funny, we talked about this last night, and there were 2 resolutions to UBCM in 2019. One was to omit the person's name and just attribute the wages to the job title. From a matter of, we still want the transparency, we still want to be accountable to the public. But in small towns, that's really problematic for privacy and security. And so the resolution was endorsed by the membership, and it was recognized by the province. The province said, hey, if you want to talk about this again, like, we're open to it. So I think that probably went into a long list of things for UBCM staff to negotiate with the province on. The second resolution that I read was to raise the threshold, and there is certainly a willingness from the province to raise the threshold, but to what, I think, is the question. And so again, this is probably in the work plan of the, because there was a whole piece of work that UBCM was doing with Ministry of Finance on changing local government financing reform. And so I think there's a whole bunch of interest, but nothing has, that we know of, changed at this point. I think the scrutiny around Metro Vancouver and a number of Sophies around the province, there was a big piece on Global News this morning talking about Sophies and why it's problematic, because and the city of Kamloops is going through it right now because there's real concerns about who's getting what, and this report actually, in some cases, compiles too much data into the numbers, and therefore it doesn't accurately reflect the salaries, and therefore makes people look bad. I think there's also just an interest in, and there's so many good reasons to have this report in front of the public for accountability and transparency. And none of us is shying away from that, but you want that number to be accurate. For example, where they're being reimbursed, when we get grants, those grants aren't necessarily being reflected into, where those salaries are coming from. And so there's it's not problematic from our staff's perspective as far as accurately reporting on it. It's the what, and it's completely out of our staff's control as to how these reports are compiled. And this was the story on Global News this morning, was that it doesn't tell the whole story fairly. So I think that, if we as a board, or I'm sure there's a bigger, I'm sure Metro Vancouver is probably looking at resolutions as well, to change that reporting mechanism so that it is more accurate, because the last thing we need is to damage the integrity or the perception of integrity within local government, in a time where the whole world is looking at politicians and local governments, all orders of government, for accountability and transparency. And so that was my rant for the day. Any other questions? Susan?
I just see, when looking at it, and I go, holy man, look at Salvador Demare with his expenses just so outrageously higher than the rest. Because we carpool and Sal always does the driving.
Yeah.
And so the rest of us are sitting there at zero, and Sal's running up this tab, and there's no explanatory note for that. So, yeah.
There's not really a mechanism for that. Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Sal.
But now you've explained
I'll
it
take
for
all
the
the-
benefit of the record, so everybody knows why, Sal.
It's on the record.
There we go. Go ahead.
My question was actually just about that. Isn't there the ability when the expenses claim to say this is a shared expense? Can you break this out? I think it's good for transparency, because if that isn't the case going forward, and then the next area B director has a an expense that doesn't match previous Sophie reporting, and I know that I've done similar things where this expense was actually split between myself and two counselors that were in attendance or something like that.
Well, this is
in
food and
municipal-
this is driving.
Yeah, or something like this. Is there ability to do that, to clean that up going forward? Because I think the reporting is actually important to make it life easier in future for everybody, not because I think those expenses are well justified. That's not what I'm saying, but
No one's questioning that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing with it is, I attend everything, like all the conferences. And I'm gonna try to attend the UBCM also. And that all adds up.
Yeah.
One of the things I would think is missing in these conversations is what the budget is. Like, if you've got a budget amount of 50,000 and you're hitting 15, that's good context for people to have versus the inverse of that happening, you know what I mean? So there's lots of room for improvement in this, but I think if we could figure out a way to break some of those expenses out, so that, because I don't think it is a fair representation that Director Birch Jones, for instance, is a.
Let's look at the,
I'm not saying we change this, but just in future,
Yeah.
it's be useful.
in the PIC and the Squamish, newspaper, whatever it is. I mean, they always report and they say, wow, look at this
Yes.
guy.
Yeah.
But they never phone me to ask,
Yeah.
why do you have all that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Through the chair, we do have the ability to split an expense between two directors if that is made apparent to us at the time that the expense report is submitted. I don't think we've done that traditionally, so.
It's hard to do because I drive by myself part of the way, then you forget it.
To me, it seems like a complicated assignment for not
Yeah.
a lot of.
Is it really
return,
worth
like,
it?
No.
your time is valuable.
I wouldn't say it's a big burden on staff time. It would probably be more the tracking of the kilometers that are shared and aren't shared. So
Yeah.
if that information is made available to finance, it's easy for us to submit it correctly. and split that, but it's.
Okay,
It's not,
yeah.
It's not worth it.
Let's bring that back to a future discussion workshop or something.
I think the key is just being proactive. Is mostly with the newspapers.
Yeah.
Cause they just. Whatever.
They're gonna report what they're gonna report based on what they see on a video.
I got thick skin.
I have Director Hoffel.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on the bandwagon because I was saw my expenses and I was a little horrified as well. But then I figured it was hotels and I hadn't thought about the hotel fees going in there too. So, well, I don't know that we need it all split out every time. It would be nice, a little blurb on, to say if it does go to press that, a lot of the higher expenses are shared and rides and hotels and that kind of stuff. But yeah, thanks.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Communications has prepared speaking notes for chair and for should we get questions. I feel the director of communications kicking me under the table right now to remind everyone that if the press does call you, please refer to them back to communications where and not make comments.
but just to sort of get this into a little bit of perspective.
What's up?
If you look at the remuneration, total remuneration for the whole board, it's $310,000. And I was listening to Global TV last night, talking to the mayor of Richmond, who earns $350,000 himself, and in that discussion was also justifying a trip to Europe that was thousands of dollars. So quite frankly, I don't think we should be spending too much time pulling this apart and separating it out for the sake of $200 here and $1,000 there.
No, I agree with you. And I wouldn't want to go to that level of detail, but I think that it is important for us to know going forward where we're budgeting for. Is everybody going to UBCM? Is everybody going to their area association? Is everybody going to FCM? We've never budgeted for anyone to go to FCM. Is that valuable? And then it's really challenging and many of the discussions we've had around remuneration for directors is, are we claiming all of the wear and tear on our vehicles as we're driving to different places to meet with people? Are we volunteering our time, or are we being fairly compensated? And how do we attract people to do this work going forward if it's volunteer time or if it's and also so that we can properly budget for the things that we feel as a board are important for us to visit and to do. I think it is important that there's hotels provided for directors coming from Lillooet so that they're not driving back and forth in December 2 days in a row. That's a part of our budget, but it accurately reflects the cost of doing local government business. And so I think this was a really good conversation. Thank you. Okay, so we will now approve as presented the 2024 statements of financial information. So moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And that the board chair and treasurer be authorized to sign the 2024 statement of financial information approval. Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Rainbow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. We're on 8.3, and this is an information report regarding the 2025 first quarter financials. And we have staff here to answer any questions that anyone has. Anything you want to highlight?
Sure, I have a few things maybe I'll speak to really quickly. First, I'll mention that this being only the first quarter, it can be tough to draw like a big picture of a lot of these services. It's still early in the year, so some trends that we see at Q1 might not be following through into Q3, Q4. That being said, most services are on pace with budget, specifically general government, which is probably our largest service. So that has 77% of the budget remaining after the first quarter. In 1300A, utilities and environmental services, you'll notice that service is in a deficit currently. That's because the offsetting revenue is allocated to the service over the course of the year, so we'll expect to see that revenue allocation occur, which will then clear that current deficit. For 1,400 building inspections, we are noticing that revenues for building inspections are trending slightly below budget this year. That being said, we tend to see more building inspection revenues once construction season opens in the quarter 2 and 3. So just something to flag right now, and we will monitor that, but it is trending slightly below budget. For cost center 1707 Brayler and Fire, we did have a request to transfer some funds from our capital reserve to purchase a new wildfire truck. So that was done in quarter 1. Total amount was 21,350. For a couple of the other fire services, 1711 Seton-Shalat and 1717 Wedgewoods. Just to note that staff time for those budgets are trending slightly over budget. We did have some additional work around agreements for those services. And one adjustment for 1906 Area A refuse grounds. You'll notice that revenue is showing at only 5% of the budget. Since the time of the report, we've actually received additional revenues, and that revenue is now up to 10% to budget for quarter 1. Although it is below budget, we do tend to see lower revenues in the winter months for those services, as it's less populated in that area at that time. And for 2702 Pemberton North Water, we had $100,000 of expenses for the Collins Road water main replacement, and those costs are funded by Area C Community Works funds. And then the last note I'll make is that for 2702 Darcy Water, expenses are pacing to be over budget for that service due to some work that was required in Q1.
Thank you, Director Stoner and then Director Mayor.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Appreciate this work. And I do think it's really good financial practice to do quarterly check-ins. I do wonder about the staff complexity of pulling this together, the amount of time, and especially for Q1, as you just mentioned, it's really hard to actually forecast out how things are going this early on in our fiscal. So I'm just wondering if you have any reflections in terms of staff time and capacity. It looks like this isn't an easily generated report from the way it's presented. It's also not a super easily way to then digest the material. And so I am curious, both from a staff perspective as well as from a board perspective, how useful this is, especially in Q1.
Through the chair, there definitely is, we've had those conversations internally of how valuable the Q1s are. It is a lot of work, and it is almost immediately after finalizing the 2024 financial statements. That being said, I think we're trying to move to a point where managers and other staff have more insight and responsibility with their own cost centers and the budgets. So it is helpful in that sense that we actually have a quarter 1 report that we can send out to management and that they can see and reference. We are looking at maybe some upgrades to our financial software that may find that same benefit without having to actually prepare Q1 financial statements, but right now we don't have that implemented. So I think that's kind of the reasoning behind having the Q1s, but I do agree with your comments as it can be a lot of work to put this together. So thank you.
Director DeMare. Sorry.
Yes, on 1906, the transfer station, Old Bridge. That you've answered one of my questions, but I got another one also. The Area A PILT for operations, 35,000. It was never received in January, February, and March.
The funding resolution wasn't passed.
For operations, yeah.
I believe it was included in the budget documentation, so it will show there, but if it hasn't been passed as an official resolution, we won't allocate that funding throughout the year. So we may show potential funding sources in the budget, and if it isn't approved, then necessarily allocate it out.
It's been approved.
It's been approved,
Yeah.
then we will allocate that as it's required. So if the service is not yet in a deficit, we don't allocate that funding until we start seeing a deficit. So if the service was on budget without that requirement, we would allocate the fund.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it'd be good to you know, we still haven't received a community works and PILT funding report. So hopefully we can see it in there.
It will show on your PILT, like I've allocated that balance out of the PILT reserve, but we don't actually transfer funds to the service until it's required. And usually when we word a resolution as operations as needed, then we wait until that service is in a deficit and then we allocate the amount from PILT to offset the deficit that we see.
Okay,
And usually that happens more in Q3, Q4, once we're further along in the year.
Okay, thank you.
Director Feingold, do you have a question?
Yeah, just following on Director Stoner's question. So I gather that the sort of more narrative piece of this report is the time consuming part. Am I correct in thinking the sort of more spreadsheet-ish sections of this is auto-generated, like it just sort of, you can press print and it'll show budget versus year to date automatically, and I'm just sort of wondering, you know, what we can get kind of out of the box versus where the labor is.
Through the chair, we have it's like a spreadsheet that we can download information from our accounting software. There's a lot of manual data manipulation required to get it into a format that is usable. It doesn't include any sort of notes, or there's a lot of accounts that are not necessarily showing correctly when you initially export that data. So we don't necessarily have a report where we could just press a button and show it to the board and have that be useful. That being said, I don't create all these financial statements by hand. There is a lot of software doing some of the work, so it's a bit of a balance right now.
And but we're on track for software that will be closer to a button press to get at least the spreadsheet portion of this, is that correct, or?
Yeah, in the budget, we have a Unit 4 optimization project budgeted this year. We're not still sure exactly what that's gonna look like, but we have identified a number of places where we could probably improve that system and reporting and manager access into the financials that would make this whole process a little easier and more effective for everyone that looks at the financial statements.
Thank you. Jumping from the auditors commented on this year and how to simplify the financial statements was one of their recommendations. That's a conversation that's happening internally, which I think will roll into changes you can see here that will be better use of staff time and still just as easy to read.
We received a report.
I have one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, when I looked at that climate action fund, and I saw that we used a little bit of it for some of the bylaw changes that are coming up later in the agenda. So are we just treating that, is that just sitting there and we'll just use it as we see it might apply to somehow related to climate action? We don't have a plan for that money otherwise?
I feel like we do.
Do we?
Which climate action reserve?
The LG cap.
Oh, the LG cap.
Yes.
We have allocated some projects. I know that in Q2, we purchased the new SLRD vehicle.
Right.
We have a few other minor projects, but there's still a pretty large portion of that is unallocated. We don't have like a full allocation resolution like we did for the Going Communities Fund. So there is still some of that funding sitting there, but like we are actively looking for projects and staff are aware that funding's there, and I think any new projects will be brought to the board for this year that are gonna be used.
Ask me, I've got one for you.
Good to know, thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Rainbow.
Oh, in 1714, there's a reference 122,233 Area D amenity, and then it says recent development funds. I'm not quite clear what that is. It's the last item in 1714.
Sorry, can you repeat which line?
1714.
Yeah.
And then it's the last item, the 122,233.
Oh, yeah, so that was a amenity reserve contribution that was specific to the Britannia Beach Fire Department. I can't remember the original amount, but it was 500,000.
Yeah.
And that. No, it's not the borrowing for the truck. It's a separate zoning amenity fund. I can't remember
top of my head what development it was from, but
Yep.
I can send you some information online.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, you're done.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
You're very, very good at this. Thank you. Were there any other questions on this? Would someone please make a motion that we receive the report? Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Birch Jones. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
8.4, an SLRD building bylaw update regarding climatic and seismic requirements from the LGCAP funding allocation request. And we have Jay McEwen here. Welcome.
Yep.
Roger.
Dan McEwen, Chief Building Official, happy to answer any questions regarding the request for funding to update our climatic design data in building bylaw 1611/2020.
Great. Question, Director Richmond, go ahead.
I'm just wondering about the recommendation to take it out of LGCAP funding. I know that we have money sitting there, but I'd like to see that for interesting projects for climate action, and I'm curious about the recommendation rather than taking this from general governments or somewhere else in the budget that an answer to that.
Through the chair, this was deemed an appropriate spend of that fund as our updated data is related directly to climate change and adapting different loading and its effects on the built environment. Late last year, the National Geologic Survey released new updated hazard data for the entire country, and in essence changed the parameters of how we measure loads imposed on buildings, so much so that we would no longer have the ability to design anything on our own without the assistance of structural engineers and registered professionals. So the remeasurement of all these parameters because of the changing climate has now resulted in a new algebraic equation of how we measure seismicity in buildings and the pressures and forces exerted on them to still allow homeowners and regular people to design buildings within Part 9 of the BC Building Code and National Building Code. So there's a direct correlation between climate change and our resilience to climate within the built environments.
And I understand that. I get the new requirements and I've read about them and I understand the correlation to climate change, obviously. I just personally wonder, for me, the LGCAP funding is for projects that this board wants to do towards climate action. And I get the relation, and I'm not married to what I'm saying. I'm just kind of curious about it. To me, this kind of feels like an operational update that we have to do due to climate change and some of the new information. So I was just curious if the rest of the board felt that the LGCAP was the right place to take that funding, or if that's something that comes out more of our general budget and LGCAP is reserved for more directed projects towards climate change. That's a question for the board.
I was actually gonna ask a similar question, in reflection that fully agree that it is in relation to climate change, but the LGCAP funding from my perspective is things that go above and beyond business as usual. And unfortunately, business as usual now has to account for the changing climate, and we're just meeting the standards as expected. And so my question was going to be, if we don't use LGCAP funding, what other options are there for funding sources to do this work?
Through the chair, the opportunity for us to refresh our entire data set was more than just with the requirements that are in the building code. It was also to address all the other changing parameters that are within that data set that go into designing the built environment. So we're not necessarily required to change 2/3 of it. It was just that we're due for a refresh. We're not mandated to do that by any other provincial or federal government body. It was due time because of those evolving parameters because of the effects of climate change within the regional district. The seismicity is one small portion that we were bundling in with this because it reflects and the data all comes from the same source.
I had Armin, then Sal, then Chris. Nope, Sal.
This stop be funded through operational reserve?
That's intensive.
Go ahead, Colin.
I figured there might have been questions about this one. I'll just, first I'll make a comment on LGCAP, and that the parameters around the LGCAP funding are very broad.
And they've kind of encouraged governments to find their own projects and ways to spend the money as long as it aligns with the BC emissions roadmap. So we have funded our emissions reporting software and finance with this funding before, so we do agree that this would be eligible. That being said, if the board does not support using LGCAP funds, we could look at other funding sources and we could potentially make it a budget amendment to pull some reserve funds to cover this cost.
Chris?
Oh.
Oh, are you done? No?
Can I make a motion?
Can I get through questions first?
Well, just saying, this seems like it's the mitigation versus adaptation discussion a little bit, and trying to look quickly, LGCAP seems that it covers both. I do feel that given where the province is on a lot of things, it may make strategic sense for us to really focus on the mitigation side, where this is more of an adaptation piece. So I'm actually sympathetic to some of the comments of maybe there's another funding source for this, and we should, LGCAP is maybe a place to focus on mitigation possibly.
Yeah. Okay, I'll consider a motion from Director Dwight. Sorry, one more question. Sure.
If we know, it's actually probably in the report just previous, how much is actually left in the LG cap?
In the LG cap, that wasn't actually, it's listed in the report, but that would have been at the end of Q1. And we did have some purchases, large purchases in Q2, including that new electric vehicle. That being said, at the end of Q1, the amount was $221,000 remaining in that fund. But we do have a few other purchases, so if I had to estimate, it would probably be slightly over 150,000 ish. Yeah.
Is it a question or a motion?
Question to inform a motion. I'm just curious on the time sensitivity of this. Like I'm hearing support around the table for this initiative, and the question is the funding model. I'm having challenges choosing pros and cons of funding source. So is there a time pressure on this if the board so chose to say approve that direction and come back with options for funding, which would happen at obviously it's a 30-day would be a 30-day delay. So I just wondered what the impact of that would be, or it's critical that we get both pieces of this decision done at this meeting.
Through the chair, full disclosure, we should have had this done in the spring. We were a little bit behind on proposing new options to the bylaw to include this information. So far, we've been using ad hoc available data from Environment Canada, which comes at a price every time we call in and check. There's also a time delay, so this is a service that we offer to the public for current construction projects, those in planning force, and those for data moving forward for budgeting purposes. Quickly is the answer.
Sal, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, the SLRD board allocate up to $9,500 from the operational reserve for this project.
Okay, do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll send it.
Seconded by Director Rainbow. Comments? Do you want to speak to the motion? Or you feel it's already been said? Okay. Go ahead.
I won't be supporting the motion. While I did raise some questions around the appropriateness of the LG cap, I am satisfied with staff's response that this goes above and beyond what our expectations would be with the bylaw review. And I think using some government grant funding sources that we have around climate action as less than 10% of what's currently available to us is a good use of that money here, as opposed to doing a potential budget amendment for using operational reserve.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments?
Through the chair, if we're just operation and business continuity, we would be asking for the bare minimum of information to update the bylaw that we would be required to by law. This is an opportunity for us to overhaul all of our climactic design data as an offering to the public for climate resiliency through all 4 electoral areas and member municipalities.
Just if I could get clarity, and I'm not sure if this is appropriate, we had this direction, the motion that's on the table. Would we need given that we heard that there was a time crunch, do we need a budget amendment? Are we delaying about 30 days by this funding change? Because time is of the essence, we've heard. And I just want to make sure that I fully understand understand as best as I can the impacts of what's on the table.
Through the chair, normally if it's a project where we're going above and beyond, then it's not something, and it's not a regular expense that we would incur. Then we would normally do a budget adjustment if we're transferring more from reserve to cover that cost. If it was a legal requirement where we had to complete it and we didn't know about it at budget time, then we would be able to insert it into the budget without an amendment. But for this project as being a selected project to go above and beyond, I think it'd be easier to make a budget amendment.
Does that delay us by 30 days to bring it back at the next meeting so that we can approve the budget amendment before we can issue the funds?
I believe I've seen resolutions where we've approved a transfer from reserve and then it just mentions that the budget be updated accordingly. So maybe Angela can double check that. There's a lot of.
You want recess?
Yeah.
Can we take a 5-minute recess?
Great.
Go ahead.
The operational reserve is $349,282.
It's whether we can do it or not.
Maybe I'll just speak quickly to the reserve. I would say that the operational reserve for the service is a bit more unusual than others because we do rely a lot on inspection revenues, and in years where inspection revenues are lower, we tend to transfer from reserve to offset lower revenues. So you will see that in the budget this year. We've actually transferred or budgeted like 150,000 transfer from reserve. And only used, let me just get the actual number to make sure I'm correct here. We budgeted $154,000 for transfer from reserve in this year, and we've only used 17,000. So if we did require that full amount as we budgeted, that reserve would be considerably lower than it is right now.
Okay. Good question.
Comment, we have a motion.
We have a motion on the floor.
So just given the discussion, I would be inclined and the amount and so on to actually defeat this. Funded as proposed by staff, but also add some staff direction for future funding requests coming forward to be more aligned to climate mitigation. And so go with as the staff for this one and provide the discussion, the direction I've heard expressed here for the future.
Want to speak to that? Is this your motion?
Yeah, we've got a lot of nonprofits in all our areas that could use that funding. And not only on SLRD infrastructure, but also for nonprofit organizations. So we need to consider that when we're making decisions.
Yeah. Except we don't have any proposals in front of us right now.
You've got one. Going back when we first started the LGCAP, each electoral area director was asked, what projects in your area would you like to see? The Goldbridge Community Complex could use a heat pump. Not the complex, Goldbridge Community Resource Building.
That's separate from the community center?
That's kitty corner to the complex. It was the old teacherage.
Through the chair, I believe we did purchase one heat pump for that area for one of the buildings.
Church.
The church.
It's
Okay,
SLRD
thank you
too.
for clarifying. So we did get, I knew we got one up there. I just wasn't sure what building.
So I'm not sure what the other electoral areas submitted to look at.
Those may have all gone by the wayside. I'm not sure though.
Yeah.
Is that a bring forward file that we?
Well, what I'm
Lost
saying
our
is that we
plan.
got lots of opportunities here for that mitigation work.
Yeah, we do.
May I respond to Director Demers' comment?
Yeah.
Through the chair, it's important for us to have this data to know how to properly design the supports for that heat pump, so that in a seismic event, it doesn't get rattled off the building. And then we've spent that money for no reason.
That could be funded through survey as well.
Right, Jen.
Yeah, through the chair, I appreciate you don't have like a specific roadmap for how to spend down the LG cap. I think that there's a potential that it becomes a reoccurring fund as well through the province, because it did replace a previous annual funding mechanism. I think that this is a really good proposal that's in front of us right now, and we have an option to fund it through a grant funding source that is directly aligned and that is going to benefit the entire region as a whole. It's not often that we get proposals that come forward that benefit every single one of us around the table. And so I think that this is actually a unique opportunity, and I would encourage my board members to support funding it as presented and getting staff on their way.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think, you know, earlier I was saying that sort of a two-part question. Yes, we should do this. How do we fund it? So I'm gonna, yes, we should do this. I disagree with the funding piece because I don't have enough information to make that decision. I do think that the funding source presented by staff I have confidence that is taken many factors into consideration. So that's my preferred path at this point in time. And we've heard about the timing piece. So I would prefer that we go there. I was contemplating amending this motion. We did a similar thing earlier, but I think that's too messy. So I'll be voting against this, but would test the staff recommendation and should this fit.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to make a plea to support this motion or to defeat it? And if we defeat it, then we consider another motion to accept the staff recommendation. I'm gonna call the question. Is there all in favor of the motion? Is there anyone opposed? Okay. So I see Director Herford, Director Pettengill, Director Stoner, Director Birch-Jones, Director Hopful, and Director Morden, and myself. So the motion is defeated. I'll now ask someone to make the motion as laid out in the report that we support the $9,500 coming from the LG cap. Moved by Director Herford, seconded by Director Rainbow. Are there any comments? Director Birch-Jones?
No, it's clear that we need to have a board discussion about maybe that fund.
That's right.
That would be great.
Yeah. We'll put that on a future agenda so that we can understand what other projects are out there and move forward from, so that we at least know it's really good to see these boxes of money, but understanding what else is committed in those boxes or could potentially come out of those boxes over the next 12 months is very, very helpful. Go ahead. I'm gonna come back to you.
Can I add a bit of a complexity? Just LG cap is 80% funding, so it would be up to 9,500, but there would still be, I guess I'm realizing, a 20% that would need to be funded by the service, because the max of any project is 80%, just to make that clear. And
Okay, doesn't change the intention of the motion though, so we do that. Director Pettengill?
Yeah, because it sounds like this could come back to us, I'm not gonna make an amendment about focusing future on mitigation.
We can have that conversation with. Okay. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go.
That would be like a motion to bring forward or that
Put it on a future agenda.
The entire truck
We'll take that.
under that fund, not just the extra cost of the electric truck, right? Never mind. Okay, we'll talk about,
how much of the cost was throughout?
Real rainy.
80%.
Come down hard.
Love it. Pouring rain.
All the grads are supposed to go out in their prom clothes in the great lawn and a couple of them. But kids, it's prom night.
Good thing you have that big covered barn.
I was wondering why they scheduled it in the field as opposed to the barn.
It would be beautiful in the
I
field.
assume, yeah.
Reschedule.
Express the face application coming out.
5-minute recess. Yeah. All right, we're now on 9.1, and this is the report back from the Britannia Beach Community Association meeting. This is a request, so I reported back at the last in May that, I don't know, or was that after? It was after. Yeah, so anyways, we attended a meeting of the community association, and many comments were made around the community hall and a number of different concerns in the community about how things are funded. One of the requests was to ask the SLRD to review the cost management of the playground, which is currently located on private property, on strata property. So it's not a person's property, it's a strata's property. And so in the interest of the community group, we're bringing it here to ask the board for support in asking staff to do this work, come back with options for us. Is that captured? Because we don't know what we don't know right now. We don't know, and we have staff here to answer any questions that they can answer as we go, but I wanted to, am I capturing this?
I think it would be worthwhile for staff to be able to answer some quick questions. There are some possible legal restrictions on the ability to do this.
Right. So you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I had some comments to make about it.
Yeah, why don't you start with comments, because you heard what you heard, the three of us were there. I think Director Rainbow is far closer to this organization than I am, for sure.
And I've had several conversations since.
Yes.
With them, so.
I just need clarity.
Yeah.
Is this to maintain it, to move it, to what's?
Can I just?
He's gonna explain.
Oh, you are,
I'll
okay,
soon
sorry.
explain where we're at. The history of it is this: when we did the rezoning for Britannia, two of the amenities that we wanted were a community garden and a community playground, public facilities. And the community wanted them up on Crown land, or whatever the term is now. And we as a board said no. Because if we say that, we've got no guarantee that you'll build it, whatever. We said no, we want those two amenities on your land, on private land. So that's how come they're there. So we sort of created this. Now what is, and both amenities are for public use. So they're not restricted to the benefit of the commercial village, nor are they restricted to the townhouse strata. I'm not entirely clear that they are on strata property. It's interesting. They're certainly within the McDonald development property. What's happened is that the Britannia Village, which is the commercial area, and the strata, the townhouse strata, have been billed for operating expenses and for asset management. And they don't like that. And the reason they don't like it is that they're actually paying twice, because they're already billed through their property tax to the cost centre that supports parks and trails in Britannia Beach. So they are paying through that property tax, they're paying to support the playground, which is in the upper part of Britannia, which is on SLRD land, and they're paying for the management of the open sort of landscaping in the village as a whole. But they're also being charged to pay for, through their strata fees, to pay for this public playground, which is on private land. And their situation, their feeling about that is that they shouldn't be paying twice. They're worried about liability. Our staff are worried about liability, although I don't think we should be, because I think if we say we want an amenity, then the liability should be kind of dealt with in the same way as the liability for the playground that is on our land. I think there are a couple of solutions. I think we have to do something, because it just isn't fair. And McDonald's people think it's not fair either. They say, yeah, from their point of view, they're looking at it as if we were owners in that strata, in that townhouse complex. We'd think it was unfair that we were paying twice. So I think there are a couple of ways that we could deal with it. First thing that I would recommend that asking staff to do is talk to Rob McDonald, who owns the company, and ask him to sell us the land for $1, so that the community playground and the public playground are then on SLRD land. And then there's no problem, because it just folds in and it's part of the existing cost center. That would be the simplest, the easiest one, and I think the fairest. The second thing, and I have no idea how we do things like this, but we could have McDonald's, instead of billing the townhouse strata for part of the costs, they bill the SLRD and we take the money out of the cost center.
That seems complicated.
It just seems complicated.
And I don't think we will have that answer today.
No.
So-
But another thing would be to look at the property taxes that the townhouse people pay and adjust them accordingly, reduce the amount that they pay to compensate for what they're paying for this public facility. And, you know, we knew when we wanted those amenities, we knew that they would be used by the general public. And that includes a lot of tourists. You know, people come in there, they go to the ice cream shop and their kids run out and they play on the playground. It's a great facility. It benefits the commercial area. But we knew that was going to happen because we insisted that that's where it would be built. So that it's the thing, it's not the fault of, it's nobody's fault really. It's just another one of those things where we were involved in a development. First time this board had dealt with this thing. Yes. And we made some decisions. And I didn't foresee what the consequences would be. I think if we'd have known this, if we'd have seen this consequence at the time, we might have changed the language in there and put in something to the effect that, well, I'm not sure how we would have changed that language, but we could have, or we could have considered not having it on private land. So there you go.
Okay, I'm gonna go to staff.
Yep.
Thanks. So, I didn't attend the meeting and I don't have the meeting minutes, so I'm not sure what the nature of the concerns of the residents were regarding the playground or how it's paid for. What I do know is that when this was originally brought to the board, it was meant to be on land that the SLRD has a tenure on. The board asked that it be taken off of that land and put on private land that's owned by McDonald. McDonald has been paying for maintenance of that. I'm hearing that the people in the residential strata are paying on their strata fees.
Yes.
And in that case, they probably would have been advised of that in their disclosure statement when they purchased the units. I'm not sure, I haven't seen their disclosure statement. That said, it's very similar to any development that you see. You see them all over, little townhouse developments, and there's a little tot lot, a place for kids to play. And that strata pays for their tot lot, and they pay for the maintenance of it. It is open to the public, and from what I understand, it's a very popular playground. So kids from the upper portion of Britannia, where the single family is, come down to this playground because it's a bit more of an advanced playground. The one at the top is considered more for, ages 3 to 6. So the older kids come down to this playground and it's being well utilized, but it isn't a public playground. When this area was rezoned, it was never anticipated that we take the land. Was never anticipated that McDonald give us that land. And so it is an odd sort of situation where there's a publicly available playground, but it's actually a private playground that's owned by McDonald. We did require that playground in association with the residential development as well as the community gardens. So those community gardens are exclusively for the use of the people in the residential strata. Yeah, and so it's sort of, if you think about it as people in a townhouse paying for their own little tot lot and also paying a residential tax towards other parkland in the community. And I think that's what's happening. And I think maybe people are getting confused that their own private, they have their own private lot, so why do they have to pay for the one up the hill? But that's for the entire, let's call it Greater Britannia community. That one is a public park and everybody pays into it.
So are we saying then that the playground on McDonald's land is not a public playground?
It's not a public playground. It's a playground that we required for as part of the residents because we wanted that community to have a playground.
What's likely going to happen then? One of two things. Either the playground will disappear or they'll put a fence around it and make it a private playground.
Well,
This would be no different than a public art installation on a commercial property as required by a rezoning. You wouldn't block it off from view. It's a part of and it's a benefit to the ice cream shop and the pub and the pizza place that commercial property was required to put in certain things like sidewalks and parking spots and electric chargers. And we don't block off the electric chargers to the people that are parking there, but they are public use. Now, who maintains and manages those, that is up to the strata to maintain and manage those. And should they choose to start charging to use the park, that would be weird, but they could do it. I don't know how they would do it, but it would be weird. But the point is, these are all amenities that were negotiated in the rezoning. And a playground now, if this was an issue of, anyways, I do have a speakers list, so I'm gonna go to Director Stoner, then Director Pettengill. I'll come back to you, Tony.
Thank you, through the chair. Can I just seek clarification? Is there a public right of way on the playground? Do we know?
there is not.
There's not even a public right of way.
No, but it is associated, it's immediately adjacent land that we have a public tenure to, which at some point something will happen on. The Crown is actually in the works of putting grass and paving stones down on that property.
And then I did just want to seek clarity through the chair to my colleague. In your comments, you said that the residents are now being billed for the management and the upkeep of the playground. I'm assuming they're being billed by McDonald's. They're not being billed by us.
Yeah, it's through the strata fees that they pay, the monthly strata fees.
Is it broken out? Playground fee? Or is this just their strata fee?
I've not seen it. They told me that it's part of their strata fees.
Okay. I have Director Pettengill, then Director Morgan, then.
Yeah, it just, I believe in the district of Squamish quite able to require playgrounds. There may or may not be a public right of way, and the expectation is the strata, if it's on their property, pays for it. If it's has a public right of way as well, the public has to have access. It sounds like here, it doesn't have a public right of way, which actually, to my mind, is maybe the miss. But this would be a completely normal thing. It doesn't seem to me that there's an issue for us to resolve here, unless I'm missing something. Like, this is a normal way of it. Development has an impact. We ask for offsetting, sometimes for the residents, sometimes for the whole community, and this would be one of those sort of offsets as the to and fro of rezoning and coming to a development agreement.
There is a public right of way. There's that bridge is
We're
public.
gonna come back to that.
Sorry.
On my lot, we have a playground, which is right beside a municipal maintained tennis court, which is right beside the Valley Trail. But the playground is on our property, so technically a private playground, but everybody and their mother uses it, literally. But we don't, and then in our strata fee and in our finances, there's nothing carved out that says playground maintenance. Quite frankly, in the 8 years that I've lived there, we've never had to maintain it once. We do landscaping around it. The only issue I could see here is if a kid fell off and bonked his head
and then there's a liability claim, but that's also covered with the strata insurance. So this just seems like it's a normal thing that happens in a neighborhood where they would put a park in. And unless you put a dome over it with a fob where people have to enter like that, I don't really see how, unless they take it down. So
It could be counter to their zoning.
there, yeah, so I don't, and then selling the land off for $1, we would have to maintain it as a playground.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
to that
but-
end, I don't think we can get into
No, I don't.
coming up
yeah.
with the solutions today. I think
No.
what we're asking is that staff come back with a report on that.
Yeah, and what I can just add, similar to what you said in my discussions with McDonald, the playground requires very little in the way of maintenance.
Yeah.
It's still under warranty, it's new, and so basically, like, they go in with a weed whacker,
Yeah.
you know, twice a year and cut the grass down, and that's the extent of maintenance, so,
Mine's been there since '94 and a couple of screws have had to been replaced on the slide.
yeah.
Don't use that.
So
word.
it's not a hard thing.
Okay, Director Richmond, back to the issue.
Yeah, I think most of it's been said. I was gonna use a tennis court example in our community. This townhouse complex supplies it, it's theirs, but the public uses it. So those examples have been given. I was just gonna add to that it sounds like this group needs to understand the process a little bit better, how these things work. You know, including, I liked your example of the commercial, you know, you clean your sidewalk, you provide this in front of your commercial building, everybody uses your sidewalk, everybody. So that's just the nature of how we deal with the public.
And these are amenities that we require when we do big zonings like this.
If there wasn't anything further I was gonna move receipt of the chair's verbal report, can you speak to it?
Sure.
To help move this along, as there's.
Great.
I think that, without getting into the meat of this particular issue, I appreciate a heads up that this is a topic that may come to the board in future. I'll leave it to chair and area director to figure out if that's something that does need to come to the board for consideration, but I think we collectively probably went a little further than is appropriate from a verbal update item on the agenda, but appreciate the discussion and agree that this is generally a normal course of business. So I'd like to understand what maybe it isn't for some reason, but I haven't heard that from anything that I've heard today. So if it comes in a future discussion, where we have an informed discussion, welcome that.
I mean, maybe to your point about the strata fee, maybe they think that if they took the playground away, they would have a lower strata fee, which it isn't the case. But maybe that's something that you could compare to. I don't even know. I want to give you more work than.
Director Rainbow?
Well, I'm not happy, but.
Well, the purpose of this was to bring it forward for the
Yeah,
board's
yeah,
attention because we went to this community meeting, which was a public meeting. They raised concerns, we've brought them to the board, and now we can decide if we want to put this into a bigger discussion.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd like to check the wording of it because my recollection is that it's a public playground.
Let's do that out.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Appreciate the verbal update on this issue in the community, and I appreciate that is sometimes can be challenging to do, even if there was a public right of way to previous examples. It would, at least in my experience, it would still be up to the strata to manage it and provide public access. I think that transferring it to the SLRD in any shape or form, and not to get too far down the options presented, but as you mentioned in your comment, Director Rainbow, that potential, there's still a cost that would be then shouldered by the residents. The taxes would go up because it still needs to be maintained and landscaped, but then it'd be done through a different contractor who would then be going on to private land. And so that is really difficult to, interface. So I think this is more of a communications issue more than anything else. Folks who maybe weren't totally aware of what they were getting themselves into when they were buying into new development. And I think that, as has been previously mentioned, this is a really beautiful playground and has a huge amount of benefit to the businesses in particular that are directly adjacent to it. And so I think it is a benefit to them and their business models to be supporting the playground next door, because there are people who are coming regionally to go to the ice cream shop and take their kids to the playground, and that is hand in hand why that commercial area is gonna be successful. And so if they don't see that as a benefit and they do wanna close it down and put a fence around it, that is their prerogative, it is private property. But hopefully they won't do that and they'll continue to provide the asset and the maintenance and operation for them.
Okay, are we following the question? On receipt, all in favor?
Receipt.
Opposed? Okay, no opposing. Motion carries, thank you. Okay, we have 15 minutes until our workshop begins, so UBCM convention meeting requests. We received these a couple times. Requests from provincial ministries in the Premier's office if we wish to book our speed dating meetings with them at UBCM Victoria this September. There is a tight timeline on when we can apply for these meetings. And I'll turn it over to you, Paul.
Thank you. I think I know everyone at this table probably has a lot of things that they would like to advocate for. I did want to give everyone a chance to hear what staff have been hearing over the years, and they had a couple suggestions, if everyone's comfortable with that. One of them was provincial enforcement of long-term camping on public crown land. There's a 14-day rule currently. There's no ability for the SLRD to enforce this because it's public land. Right now, there's safety, fire, and waste hazard concerns. Some examples are Wedge Park and Squamish up in the Squamish Valley. That's one that staff has brought forward as a concern, that provincial enforcement be ramped up or stronger when it comes to that. A lot of people are living there full time. Paradise Valley Road, this one it's been 3 years advocating at this UBCM table regarding this and the management of the road and Jack Webster's Bridge. It's kind of been orphaned. No responsibility, nobody's taking responsibility for it, so the SLRD is taking on responsibility. The SLRD currently draws $15,000 a year from those homeowners to maintain minimal maintenance and not really meeting all the needs in all the areas. What we said last year was we have almost 17,000 square kilometers and we're responsible to manage 50 feet of road. So it's really not our forte, and to draw more taxes from these residents is unfair. They're currently taxed at a high assessed value rate of 5% of their assessed value. That assessed value, you could argue, is based on having road access. Currently, it says there's water access only. If you went there, unless you're a really good kayaker, the water access might be difficult. So it's a constant advocacy, and we could continue with this. There is a risk associated with flooding, and it has been raised by protective services, so there could be a new angle here on that. Because it does sometimes feel like we're banging the table. No one. It was good to note that our problem with this is because Ministry of Forests and BC Hydro say they have no need for that bridge in that land. However, a lot of commercial space and recreational people are using that bridge and using that area. So it's not just the residents who feel the need, it's everyone using the area. The other one is, do you want to go through these, like talk about them on a, want me to just keep going, or do you want to
Yeah,
talk
I think
about?
give us the list.
Okay. The other one is bear awareness regarding the provincial conservation officer and office. They are experts on the subject, but there's little to no external comms, leaving it to all the regional districts, communities, and organizations to do it. And they feel like there's a real option and benefit here for the conservation office to have some investment in public comms and a streamlined approach instead of all these little pockets that we're managing either through contracts or otherwise in-house. First Nations and DRIPA. There's two requests to the ministries. One is to extend the study group in regards to inclusive governance. There's 4 regional districts that are part of a study group to include regional governance. That's about how do we move forward in inclusive governance that has more Indigenous leadership at the table that isn't just restricted to treaty members, which is what the legislation. They're doing some beta, and it's just really a lot of regional districts are talking about this and watching it, and there's an opportunity to extend that now to those regional districts who are ready for it. And then also in that same vein, capacity funding for First Nations engagement, specifically to update internal policies, legislations, bylaws that we have to align with DRIPA. And then to First Nations funding to improve relationship building with the nations. The second last one is ALC, the exemptions, not recognizing treaty nations as whole persons. We saw that ability to apply for ALR exemptions where most property owners totally could. The question of that one, we feel could be a letter at this point because it's going to be addressed. And then the last one is something that we talked about today already, which is the EDMA and the obligations that MOTT, Walworth, WLRS, and EMCR have. And that's just to kind of top the ways of what Mr. Fusco was saying. It also includes a call to all regional districts to join this. I will say that our legal, and what we're hearing is the SLRD is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to climate change and emergency response. So when we say, aren't there other regional districts who are really experiencing this? What a lot of experts are saying is the SLRD is, with all the climate that they have and represent, they're feeling it the most right now. They're the precipice. And it might be a couple of years before other regional districts feel it the way the SLRD is, but it doesn't mean that they're not watching it and very interested, especially when it comes to landslide. So it really is about provincial ministries are assigned the role of risk assessment under EDMA. They also have the responsibility to communicate that and not push that down to the local government or give us the funds and resources to do that.
So in recognition of the time, I do not want to debate the issues right now. I want to hear from the board members if there's any item that was mentioned that we do not want to advocate for. And then in the event that we put all of these forward as requests, because we can ask for all of these and we'll get what we get, then we can flesh out in the July meeting how that advocacy is informed by this board with the advice of staff on those meetings. Is that sufficient? Just because unless we want to carry this over to tomorrow and we can talk.
Could we get that list? Email the list to us, so we can review it tomorrow?
Yeah,
Send it out tonight and we could decide tomorrow.
absolutely.
Armin, go ahead.
Yeah, that's great for more consideration. I'm also thinking that some of these topics might be better served. We heard a suggestion of a letter. There might be a staff to staff
Yeah.
piece or seeking joint with some other entity.
Yeah.
I think there's a timeline issue, so we do need to resolve this in the
Sure
next couple of days. But but I wanted to highlight that this Crown on camping enforcement, the District of Squamish, we've been advocating for an expansion of camping, like legitimate camping opportunities in and around the district. So this would be in area D. Perhaps that's an ask that we have more, that this group might have more broadly, but it might be an opportunity to combine, like these things are related. So that's something I just put to the group as a way of packaging this, because I think that may be of interest to this group as well.
Okay, thank you. Thoughts on what has been? Should we have it emailed out to us tonight and we can make the decisions on what items to pull tomorrow when we come back? Go ahead.
Can we add regional transit to the list?
No, of course, we haven't talked about regional transit. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Archaeology,
Pardon me.
cost of archaeology, Lillooet's put forward a resolution through SLRD about just explaining, and Lori can certainly talk to this better than I can, Mayor Hopeful, but it was well supported, just the incredible cost of the archaeology for any kind of development and that the burden on smaller communities with limited budgets.
Okay, so if you have items that haven't been mentioned, please email me and CAO Paul, and then we can add them to the list for tomorrow.
Okay.
Does that work?
Okay. Is that a problem?
Okay, I just don't want to cut anyone off.
Yeah.
But we are cutting this off in September and we still have more tomorrow, so it's not the end of the world, but I also want to give people time because none of us have seen your list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if the ones that people have, they can raise, like we've done in previous year, they can raise in the meeting? I'm just concerned about me getting the email out and then not being able to capture what everyone's looking for.
Yeah,
So if in previous
okay,
meetings.
So if you have something new to add that wasn't mentioned or that you don't see in the email, then you can raise them tomorrow. And we'll give adequate time for this discussion tomorrow. Does that work?
Yeah, and I expect there will be more
Okay.
people.
You don't want them emailed?
No,
Okay.
bring them up tomorrow. Write them down. Thank you. Okay,
Sorry, could I just say for a minute, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be in and out tomorrow. So do you mind, Jen, if I just email you?
you email me. Yeah,
Okay,
because you're not here. Yeah,
great, thank you.
yeah, that's great. Thank you. And you have a very important meeting tomorrow, so we all wish you luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Multiple ones.
Okay, so that item is technically deferred. Do you want a motion to defer?
Motion.
Actually, why don't we just
Do you want to
recess?
just recess and we can?
And we'll come back tomorrow. Okay, we're recessing. You have 6 minutes for another little break. And we will see the public